Hello, Game of Thrones fans. We are here for the first episode of the highly anticipated House of the Dragon. Aired last night on Sunday. It's been a lot of chatter as expected. So let's get right into this review. I feel like I have to give you guys a quick disclaimer. I am a big Game of Thrones fan, but not a fanatic. I have read the original books that are out there up until Dance of the Dragons. I also have read the history, but I haven't read Fire and Blood, and I don't know all the lore like that. So you might, as I'm going through this video, realize I'm missing a few key points or a few key names. Feel free to correct me. Don't go in on me in the comments, but of course, I'm here to learn like everyone else. I'm primarily going to stick with what we've seen so far in the TV show and take it from there. I also reviewed Westworld. If you're a fan of that, you can go back and look at my earlier videos, but we'll be doing recaps of every single episode of House of the Dragon, airing or posting probably Monday afternoon. So let's get right into it. First off, name the episode The Heirs of the Dragon. So we're focusing really in getting the family, getting all the characters and getting everyone situated. What I like from the beginning is we got a nice little prologue, which kind of lets you know who everyone is, what preceded, what we're seeing now. We got information on King Viserys, pretty much what his motivation was for his line of succession, why he went away from his sister's line, Rhaenys, and he's now trying to have a male heir. And this is going to be like the fourth time that his wife Emma is going through this. So this is a big storyline to start off. And I look at this entire episode as almost like a battlefield episode. I actually titled this video The Tragic Battlefields of House Targaryen because I feel every single character is fighting their own major internal battle and it's kind of bleeding out into how they're interacting with all the other family members. So before going into that, we'll start with the series. But one thing I wanted to mention that I really liked in the opening scene is we got to see King's Landing. Now, the last time we saw King's Landing in Game of Thrones, it was in ruin based on what our girl Daenerys did, burnt to the ground. It looked like winter. Everything was black and cold. Everything was just destroyed. So seeing King's Landing in its heyday was a nice touch to begin the episode. And the key thing is we're starting off with a dragon flying through the air. Now I remember how many seasons it took us to just get a full-grown dragon. So that was wonderful seeing a full grown dragon flying through King's Landing. And the key thing is nobody was surprised. Everybody was going through King's Landing, minding their business, not afraid in the very least. So that kind of lets you know we have 10 fully fledged adult dragons out in the world. And it's not surprising to anyone. The dragons are fully integrated into society and domesticated for the most part, is what we're seeing. So that was very cool to see. It's going to be a completely different dynamic with this series as opposed to what we saw before with Game of Thrones. So starting with the series, the line of succession is his main battlefield for me. He has seen his wife suffer through three or four unsuccessful births. He has his daughter Rhaenyra, but of course he wants a male heir. So she's going through stillborns, miscarriages, but he knows how important that is to his legacy and to his family line to have a male heir, especially when he's made the decision to go away from tradition, going with the male heir from his sister's line. So now it's really, time is of the essence at this point. His wife Emma is getting older. There's no guarantee that there's going to be an heir, and that the wolves are always at the door. If there's any type of break in that line, other people are going to come with their own claims and everything. So he's really feeling the pressure, I feel. And the interaction with his wife is very tender, the scenes that we see with them, but you can't help but notice how labored she is. Anytime a pregnancy happens, it's supposed to be a joyous time, right? Everyone's happy for the mother, everyone's touching her belly. This woman can barely stand. She is just haggard looking, hair is a mess, doesn't not even really able to kind of, talk with authority. She's like already worn out. And she tells him that this is the last one I have in me. I can't go through this again. Just not just even my body, just emotionally. continually losing a child. And he tries to reassure her by going back to what we've seen in the original series about prophecy and how prophecy is interpreted. He feels that he had this major dream showing that a boy is going to be born, a boy that's going to come through this line and save everything. He kind of later on tells that same story to Rhaenyra about Aegon's vision. So he feels that this is his vision, the one that Aegon got before, that kind of shows the end of humanity when the White Walkers come and all that. He feels he's gotten something similar about this is the child that is meant to be. This is the male heir that's going to come. So that is a very important thing because when you get something like that in your mind, you're not going to be able to deviate from that. You're going to feel like I have to, by whatever means necessary, I have to make sure that this male child comes to fruition. And I feel like this becomes a tragedy, almost like a quote unquote bad miracle, because when it becomes apparent that that her life is in danger with this childbirth, he feels he has to lean towards what the prophecy said. He doesn't really even consider, I need to save my wife. I feel like maybe this was something that was missed in the writers when they constructed this, but you would think with so many failed pregnancies and the state of her health that they would have had a conversation like this at some point as far as, if it gets to the point where you have to choose between me or the child, choose the child or choose me. It feels like that conversation didn't happen. And he took all that weight on himself based on what he felt the vision or the prophecy was supposed to be. So probably the most disturbing scene of the episode was watching them hold her down, Queen Emma, in order for them to do a medieval, ancient version of a C-section and literally cut the baby out of her as she screamed no and said, "Don't do this to me." So that became very apparent that they did not have this conversation, and this was not something that she wanted. There's one line that she said earlier on when she was talking with Rhaenyra about what is our purpose as women in the society. Because Rhaenyra, she does not want to be like the dainty, just, woman in the court. She wants to be out there on the battlefield. She wants to take the role that her father is looking to give to the male heir. And she feels like because she is a woman and because she's a girl, her father never truly loved her or embraced her or saw the gifts that she has for leadership in her. And when Queen Emma is talking with her, she tries to reassure her and tell her that this discomfort that we're feeling and everything is for the service of the realm. This is our battlefield as women. Childbirth, taking care of children. This is our battle that we have to focus on. And the key thing about that with any type of battlefield, being a warrior or anything, is supposed to be a choice. You're supposed to be able to have the choice if you want to lay down your life in battle, if you want to sacrifice. That's the self-determination that you have. But the tragedy with Queen Emma is that she didn't have that at the very end. It wasn't left up to her to determine how she wanted to fight this battle. It was the men around her who determined what her life was worth and what her life was worth in relation to that child to be. And they just butchered her, for all intents and purposes. And we find out later on that it was all for naught because the child literally dies within a few hours. So look at that compound tragedy of this apparent vision that Viserys thought that he was bringing to fruition. It made him lose not only just another child, but also his wife and probably the trust of his daughter Rhaenyra, because even though she wasn't in the room when this C-section happened, I'm sure that she's seen her mother's body or heard exactly what happened, and I'm pretty sure that's going to cause a complete rift with her father going forward, even after what happened later on, which we'll go to in a second. So that's the first battlefield. So Queen Emma, unfortunately, her battlefield led to her ruin. You see, Viserys' battlefield led to almost the destruction of his entire family, as he mentions later on in the council when they're trying to push him towards, you need to make a decision. I know that you're mourning, but we need to find out who the next heir is going to be, and we're getting a good hint of what type of counsel he has. And it's really hard to determine who's on his side. Lord Corlys, he seems to be the most level-headed. He says from the beginning that Daemon is the next one in line, but he does open the door, of course, for his wife, because she was the one that was passed over, the queen that never was. Queen Rhaenys. So you have to wonder whether Corlys is his own man, or is he really just parroting everything that's coming from Rhaenys? Is she like the power behind him, kind of guiding him on what he needs to do to play the game, which we'll probably see in the next, well, pretty much throughout the season. Now on Hightower's end, who's the master of coin, he's the one I feel we should keep an eye on. I'm not going to say he's like this season or this series version of Littlefinger, but he's the one where I feel like you're never going to be completely sure what he's thinking and what he's scheming. The only thing you can know for sure is that he wants to make sure that he remains in power no matter what. And we see that later on with his daughter Alicent, who's the attendant for Rhaenyra, teenage attendant, in a very disturbing moment when she comes in to see him after the queen dies, Otto tells her that you need to dress up like your mother and go into the king's chamber and comfort him. And there's a lot of coded language in that, and we know exactly what he means. While he's at his most vulnerable point, you need to go in there and work your quote unquote feminine wiles and try to be the next in line. Because obviously, the queen wasn't fertile enough to bear children, but maybe you can. And you can see the pain in her face. And just like the person she's attending in Rhaenyra, we see the same type of pain and longing for your father's acceptance and your father's pure love, but he doesn't look at you as a full-fledged human being. You're basically just a means to an end. And he's essentially using her to try and get in the throne, essentially, through her womb. And, she is almost in tears at that point, but she does try to have a little bit of autonomy when she goes in there, is not to try to get him in the bed. She's trying to just show sympathy and warmth and keeps her distance. We'll have to see how long she's going to be able to do that, because if she keeps coming into his chamber like that, at this stage, he's going to start looking at her as a younger woman, a teenage woman. Unfortunately, that's the disturbing thing about this series, that maybe he can get his heir through her. So that's something to keep in mind. I'm pretty sure the books go more into that fire and blood and all that, but I have not read that yet, so I can't really give any speculation on where that goes, if it's going anywhere or if I'm completely off. So, touching on the next battlefield, we touched on the series Rhaenyra's battle, and then also let's go to Daemon. Now, Daemon, we love our villains and we love our three-dimensional characters and everything. He was the one that stood out to me as like, okay, we need to keep our eye on this one. He was giving me Ramsay Bolton type vibes, just the type of smirks that he was having, when looking at authority figures, the way he was kind of sneaking around and eavesdropping on the council. And then when we saw the brutality that he's capable of with the City Watch, that showed me as like, okay, and he has 2,000 people under him with the City Watch, people who are thugs and straight out of prison, so that made me look at, okay, this is someone that Viserys needs to keep his eye on. Potentially, he's going to usurp the crown. That's what I was thinking about for the first 30 minutes, but on the second half, I started to relent with that a little bit. Yes, he's brutal. Yes, he's capable of wanton violence. Yes, he wants power. But at the same time, I do feel that he has a strong dedication to his family. We see he has a very strong love for Rhaenyra. And they probably are the closest out of the entire Targaryen family that we've seen. And why do I say that? Because they talk to each other in High Valyrian, which no one else does. So they have a deeper understanding not only of their family history, but I feel like their place in that history or where their place can be in that history. And I feel like they're each other's confidant to a degree. He actually got into the city before anyone was aware, and the only person that knew was Rhaenyra, and she saw him sitting on the throne. So one thing that I feel Viserys was wrong about was stating that his brother doesn't have any ambition for the throne. That's absolutely wrong. The fact that he was sitting in that throne looking very comfortable, that is something that he is looking forward to as the next in line based on the succession that Viserys set up. So, as far as whether he has the ability for treachery to betray his brother, to potentially kill him, and all that, initially I was saying no until they had that big confrontation. Um, Anytime that there's a death in the family or a funeral, I think all of you guys know that's when all the bad blood and the resentment and underlying hurt feelings that may be in your family tree, all that comes out, especially when it's someone that's, like a matriarch, so to speak. So Damon put his foot in his mouth, while he was sitting there, at the pleasure house, the drinks are flowing and everything. He made an off-the-cuff comment about, the baby that died being only the heir for the day, for just that Balon, an heir for a day, and then he died. And that completely infuriated the series that he would talk about his son like that died. And that caused a rift that I don't believe is ever going to be fixed. They had it out and neither, here's the thing, you really almost couldn't take sides because both of them were telling the truth. On Damon's end, he was exactly right. He told Viserys that there's no one you can truly trust in your council. They're only out for themselves and for retaining power. And they know that you're weak. Particularly at this point, you're weak because you're emotionally vulnerable. You're prone to make rash decisions because you are in mourning. I wouldn't let that happen to you. Despite what you may think of me, I'm your brother and I love you and I would protect you. I feel like he was telling the absolute truth. As flawed as he was not lying. And on Viserys' end, he wasn't lying either. He was like, you've always undermined me, you belittle me because you think I'm weak. In a way, you don't respect me and you don't respect my position. And what you said about my son is almost unforgivable. You said it in public. That's the most hurtful thing. And the word traveled back to me. And it's like, if I can't trust you in the position that I've given you, you claim that I'm keeping you at arm's length as a city watch, but that's kind of a trial run to see how you operate. And, just the fact that you've already kind of overstepped your bounds, that lets me know that you're not worthy of the throne. And there's a good chance that you would try and upend everything that I've tried to put in place. So I can't have you here. You need to go. You need to go back to Runestone and get out of here. So, and he was completely valid in having that viewpoint, especially about what he said about the son. Now, Damon did mention a point that we all mourn in different ways. And I do think there's truth in that. Some people, they kind of just shut in and isolate themselves. Other people go full blown in, doing hedonist activities or whatever makes them happy. And that's what I feel Damon was doing. But that comment was still uncalled for. I think if he would at least try to apologize, maybe it wouldn't have ended like it did. But he wasn't even willing to give that. So now we have a very strong divide between the brothers, and that now that Damon is flying back, he flew back with the woman that's been comforting him in the pleasure house. I don't believe they mentioned her name. I don't want to just call her like, just the whore or something like that. I know officially she'll have a title, but for now, let's just call her the lady of the pleasure house. So now she is riding back on the dragon. He's teaching her to try and get um acclimated with, I believe Caraxes is the dragon's name for Daemon. So she's going to be, his queen to be, I feel, so to speak, because now that he's been banished, he still has the city watch with him. So that's at least 2,000 people who are devoted to him. I feel keeping him close would have been the smarter move. But now sending him away, that's going to give him time to build up an army and then come back to King's Landing. So now we have to keep that in mind with Daemon. So for Daemon's battlefield is, do I really want to completely, usurp my brother, who, yes, I have a very bad relationship with now, but I still love his daughter Rhaenyra. That is still the one I'm closest to in the family. And if I do anything to Viserys, that's definitely going to hurt and devastate her and impact that relationship. So am I willing to do that? Am I willing to go to that point of no return? So that I feel is Daemon's battle. So moving on, as far as other battlefields, those are the main characters that we got so far. As far as Rhaenyra's, her struggle is, oh yeah, Rhaenyra, her struggle. Her biggest struggle is you got what you asked for, but is this what you truly want? She wanted her father to see her with all of her gifts and realize her potential as a leader. And it took her mother dying for him to see that. And now he's willing to give her the line of succession. So meaning when he passes, she's going to be queen now. And there was a complete look of shock on her face. And I think she's going to realize very quickly that is this worth it? Is this worth the Iron Throne and everything that comes with it? Is this worth, everything that I thought I wanted? Because now everyone is going to be against her. Now this is going to impact her relationship with Daemon. He's not going to look at her the same. We saw in the previews that apparently there ends up being a beef with Alicent, who is her, her confidant before. They were very close. Now that's going to be at odds because obviously Otto is trying to position her as the next queen. So everyone that she loves, it feels like is going to be at odds with her. The only wild card I see with this is Rhaenys, who is Corlys. Her Rhaenys being Corlys's wife. So that would make her Rhaenyra's aunt, I believe. So that is probably going to be her only confidant because, you see them talking and she talks about how the men treat them and how they don't want a queen. But you got to look at her motivation too, because she was the queen that never was. So if she's going to be completely happy with, Rhaenyra getting that position, or if she's going to look at it as Rhaenyra is usurping what rightfully belongs to me. And is she going to use her position to undermine Rhaenyra and then eventually try and get the crown for herself? That is something I'm keeping a very big eye on because it's hard to say. We didn't really get too many scenes with Rhaenys as far as, talking. So you really can't see as of yet where her motivations may lie. So she's kind of like the biggest wild card to me out of the entire episode. Going back to the battlefield motif I've been mentioning, let's talk about the one battle that actually did happen in the episode, and that would be the tournament, the jousting tournament. So we all are familiar with that because of what happened with the secret wedding with John's parents and everything. So we know how that tournament's how they go as far as getting a lady's flower to be being her champion and all that going forth. So we saw a little bit of that with potential love interest for Rhaenyra with the Baratheons, and we know how that factored in the original series. So she keeps her eye on, I think his name is Kriston Cole. Well, actually, he's Dornish, so that's somebody else. But she did mention keeping her eye on some of the Baratheon brothers that were in the jousting tournament as well. So we also got to see Daemon's fighting attributes. He was basically running through everybody. So he's going to be a very formidable fighter on the battlefield. We can see that. And we saw that that battle was juxtaposed between what was going on with Queen Emma and losing the child. So that kind of also shows that parallel between battlefields. But there's one thing that was mentioned, I believe, by Reyna when they were talking about the brutality of the fighting and all that. And I think Corlys, her husband, mentioned that, this is pretty bloody. People were dying out there. The jousting, once somebody got dismounted, that wasn't the end of it. They were fighting on the field. This almost to me looked at this is kind of like the reality TV of this world, because you had the regular people just watching and cheering it on and getting a good kick out of these guys just fighting over no really good reason. So this was like their entertainment television, their Roman Coliseum of the day. But Corliss mentioned this like, this is pretty violent, that we're looking at and all that. And Rainey's was like, oh, please, these knights are green. They haven't seen any particular warfare. There hasn't been any major battles in decades. So they don't really know what true combat is. And there's a scene of one of the knights dead with his eye gouged out or cut out, and he's a bloody mess. So I looked at that image, and the first thing that crossed my mind is that if that is a green, if this type of combat is the combat that we're seeing between green soldiers, soldiers that have never really seen combat, just imagine the type of warfare we're going to see when, the battles really pick up, because we're going to be getting some infighting and battles later on in the season. So that to me was a hint of the bloodshed or the level of bloodshed that we're going to see later on in this series. Um, so overall, I was very happy with what we got. I do say that there's one big contrast in the original series. I feel like we got bigger characters, so to speak, in the opening episode. And what I mean by that is characters that really caught you from the beginning, like Joffrey and Tyrion. Those guys, their presence and everything was just so big. It's like we gravitated towards them immediately, particularly with the lines and their presence. This one I feel was a lot more subdued. Daemon, of course, stood out to me. Rhaenyra, of course. and also Alicent. Those were the characters, and I would say Hightower too, just based on how they're positioned, though, more so than their personality. That's what kind of stood out to me. So no big characters yet as far as personality wise. This was a more subdued approach, which I did like. Very good contrast. And I feel like we set up a lot of things, going forward. I'm particularly interested to see Rhaenyra, who is going to support her out of the realm, out of the Seven Kingdoms, because nobody really looked too happy to be, declaring their service to her when she takes over the throne. And the one key one that stood out to me is Rickon Stark. They showed him mouthing the lines about, I promise to be dedicated to Rhaenyra, when she assumes the crown. But he looked very pained just to say that. Like it looked like it hurt him to just utter those words. He looked very upset by the whole proceedings. So it makes me wonder how much of the Starks we're going to get and what type of allies they're going to be. If I had to guess, I can see them backing Daemon, if it becomes a struggle for the crown later on in the season, like we're anticipating. Some of the smaller storylines, I did mention that Kriston Cole, with the duel that he got Rhaenyra's favor as being her champion, him being Dornish, so we know the Dornish history with the crown, so it'll be interesting to see the role that Dorne plays. There was a mention of the free cities. There's currently a triarchy, which is kind of like a rebel alliance, and they have a leader. I think the name was called the Crab Feeder. I love these names that they have in Game of Thrones. So that is a potential threat coming from across the sea to keep in mind. Let's see, any other subplots that crossed my mind? Oh, one thing. I did do a little bit of reading for this video, not too much, just, like checking around, trying to do some research on Rhaenyra. I saw something, I think it was on the Game of Thrones wiki or the Song of Ice and Fire wiki. They said one of her traits, as far as like when she gets nervous, she like plays with her hands, she like uh twiddles the rings on her fingers back and forth a lot. That's like her nervous tick. I did notice with Alicent when they were having the tournament, and she was kind of, flustered a little bit by the violence as well. Her nervous tick seems to be, it's like she bites her nails, even to the point of bleeding and all that. So the fact that the wiki has that down for Rhaenyra, I'm assuming that came from the Fire and Blood book. And then here in the series, it's Alicent that actually has that nervous tick. It makes me wonder how much of, creative licensing they're using between the books and the TV show. I didn't think about that. There was creative license, of course, with the previous series. I think I just automatically assumed here they were just going to be an immediate book to TV show translation. So I'm wondering if they just took that skill or that nervous tick and just applied it to Alicent as kind of a wink to the book readers, or am I wondering is there something more subversive as far as the connection between Alicent and Rhaenyra? Like they're around each other so much that they pick up each other's traits like that, and that this is something that the older Rhaenyra she picked up from Alicent. So that's something to keep in mind. I'm gonna keep an eye on that. Also, that subplot of Alicent and Rhaenyra, I want to see how that develops. I'm really intrigued by that because they seem so close now, but there's going to be the men I feel in their family that are going to pull them apart. We see with Hightower, the fact that Alicent really wants his love and his approval. I feel like that's going to tear her away from Rhaenyra. So very interesting. And we didn't even really need to get a lot of the dragons. Just the fact that we know that they're there for the later on, I guess, warfare that's to come was good enough. We didn't really need to see a lot of the dragons. One last thing I wanted to touch on was Viserys and Rhaenyra. That particular scene where he anointed her, saying that you're going to be the next in line. It was touching to a degree because, it finally showed that he looked at her for all of her worth, for all of her leadership qualities, and he seemed to finally see her to a degree. But I also feel like it took him having that blow up with his brother for that to happen. And I don't feel that the motivation was completely genuine. It was really just the fact that he was trying to smite his brother to a degree. And the biggest way he can hurt him would be taking that line of succession from him. So that kind of bothered me that what should have been a completely joyous moment for Rhaenyra, the foundation of it was really just resentment and strife that really, I feel, motivated him to make that decision. And I feel like that's going to fuel all the conflict that we're likely to see later on in the season. So I want to end it there. I know I can ramble for a while about the show. I feel like this is enough for episode one. We're going to have a lot going forward. Just to let you know, I'll be reviewing every single episode, posting it probably every Monday afternoon by about 4 p.m. Eastern time. So let me know what you guys think. Book readers, you're welcome as well. Don't try not to spoil too much for me because I haven't read the book yet. But knowing me and knowing how the series is going, I'm probably going to read Fire and Blood probably by mid-season. I don't think I can hold out the entire season the way things are going. But I am very excited. Looking forward to it as far as favorite characters. I'm loving Rhaenyra, Alicent, Hightower just for his double dealing nature, I feel, is already in effect, and also Daemon. So those are the people that stood out to me in episode one. All right, well, I'll see you guys next Monday with my recap of episode two, and looking forward to any of your thoughts on this recap.